welcome both of you, Dr. Willem Lammers and Alan. And Alan's going to carry an interview to Dr. Willem Lammers, and we're going to talk about the past, present, and future of logosynthesis. So I give you the floor.
So, guys, my name is Alan O'Donoghue. I am from Ireland, and I have been working with logosynthesis for almost 10 years now. I can't actually remember, but it's quite a while. And when Willem was talking about doing his state of the art this year, he said, right, I don't want to just put something out there and with no context or to present it to everybody. So I thought I'd ask you to interview me. So when I say interview, it's going to be more of a conversation between myself and Willem and both of our experiences of logosynthesis over the years, but we'll very much kind of delve into what Willem has done and how it's developed. And I suppose, Willem, you kind of came in there on the questions and answers, but I suppose, do you want to give people a little bit more of a background of yourself, briefly?
Briefly. Oh, just 70 years in...
Just covered 70 years in about 5 minutes, if you can. That'd be fantastic.
70 seconds. Okay. I'm Dutch, and I'm very Dutch. I come from the Catholic South in the Netherlands. My grandparents were farmers, and my father came to the city because he had an allergy for everything in the farm. So that's where they started. So the post-war generation. I was one of the first in my family to take high school, or go to high school, or gymnasium as we called it. And I didn't know what to do after gymnasium, so I didn't want to teach a language. I was not very interested in chemistry. I was too stupid for physics. And in the end, I thought, okay, I study social sciences. And there were three at the time, so it was sociology, which was too unclear. It was cultural anthropology, which I didn't know what it was. And the last one was psychology. So I studied psychology. That was how it started. And when I studied psychology, I discovered that really I loved to work with people. So I had an internship in a psychiatric clinic, psychotherapy clinic, and I decided to be a psychotherapist. That was my job. And I also liked to work with groups, so I studied social psychology. And I remember that at the time I studied, it was a question, do you want to work with groups or do you want to work with individual clients? And in fact, it's what I'm still doing. I'm working with individual clients. I'm working with groups. After my studies, I worked at the university for a few years. When I got the chance to get a clinical job, I changed from a doctoral dissertation program to a high mountain clinic in Switzerland. And that was also good for my health because I had a very serious asthma at the time. And in fact, that saved my health and there with the rest of my life. I worked there for 12 years. I took Gestalt, bioenergetics, TA training, NLP training, and then the moment to become self-employed, I founded an institute for training and supervision, coaching, and organizational development, and I also became a trainer in TA. I learned NLP, and I never was satisfied with what I did because something was missing. I always had this spiritual vein that was interested in the bigger things in life, and psychotherapy was always very materialist, determinist. The whole CBT tradition was very strong at the moment, and I didn't like it. So I kept learning. I discovered EFT and energy psychology in the 90s. Made quite a few trips to the US to learn that. Was the first person who actually taught EFT in Europe. organized the first energy psychology conference in Europe in 2001. And then I had a big crisis because I still couldn't connect the therapy and the therapeutic magic with the spiritual dimension. And then at a certain moment, I had my moment of deep insight and an experience that matched it on January 11, 2005, where I had this experience. Here it comes together. It took me some time to realize what was going on, but I had already thought in terms of energy. And when I discovered the power of words, at the time there was a website called immunix.org. I don't know if it still exists. And they treated cancer with sentences, and they had very good results. But for me that was still too complicated. So what I've done is to make it as simple as possible. And if you heard the principles that Pamela told at the beginning of this meeting, everything is energy, or we are energy, and we are essence with mission. Energy belongs to you or it doesn't. Every energy has its own place, and words move energy. So that's, let's say, in somewhat more than 70 seconds, how it came at that moment. So from there, yeah, we had all the things we talked about today.
Yeah, and we'll get into some of the nitty gritty in a bit, but talk to me about the mission and the importance of the mission and the relevance to people finding their mission, and also, I suppose, some of the challenges to discovery. Because I know in my own practice, sometimes I can talk with clients about a mission, and they can kind of look at me and say, I just don't want to feel this blockage anymore. I don't care about some higher purpose or mission. Just help me get through this. What's your take on that, and why it is so important to figure out what your mission is, if you can?
I think in any form of coaching, counseling, psychotherapy, supervision, there are only two questions, and all the rest is decoration. And the first question is, what are you here for in this life? And most people don't have a clue. They haven't even thought about it. That life could have a meaning is not familiar to them, because they are governed by the matrix, by the system that tells them what to do and how to do it, and they continue doing it. And on the other side, you have the people who know they have a mission, but they don't really contact the world, and they don't connect to the world in which they have that mission. So we have on the one side the materialists who don't care about a mission. They could care about satisfying their physical and their emotional needs. And on the other hand, you have the more or less esoteric people who know that they have an important function in this world, but they don't know how to do that. And so for me, it's very important to find that overlap between what I call essence and the other part, which I call the matrix in my latest book. So the first question is, what's your mission? And you can work quite a lot with people to clear that. And the second question is, what keeps you from living that mission? And then they start with the parents, they start with the boss, they start with the circumstances, they start with the money or with health or whatever. And these are all, let's say, fields in which energy is frozen. They can't move towards fulfilling their mission. So once you have these two questions answered, your client can do Logosynthesis on their own. But before you answer those questions, there is no meaningful counseling, psychotherapy, or any form of change. And I think if we look at the main big therapies, CBT, in CBT you have a motivation, and the motivation must come from somewhere, from someone who motivates you, or someone who enables you. That's not mission. And it doesn't give a meaning to do CBT. It doesn't give a meaning to resolve a problem, or to solve a problem, or to cope better with your boss in coaching. Because you have to answer the question, what is this mission? What's this job good for in my life? And let's say if you describe developmental psychology in 1 minute, you have a quarter of your life you're learning, a quarter of your life you're practicing what you learned, and then you have to think about what is my contribution to this universe, and then you say goodbye and take some time off to get used to the end. And what I see is that many people get in trouble in the transitions. I learned a lot, but now I have to do it. I did a lot. I have my mortgage, my children, my car, and my home. And the children go to school. And who am I? And that who am I question shows up in a transition, in a crisis. And then you have done your job and you retire, and then you get a new crisis because the world doesn't need you anymore. And who are you when the world doesn't need you anymore? How can you find meaning in that last stage of your life in which the spiritual dimension, I think, must have a place?
That's really important. And I think that leads us nicely onto the development of the basic assumptions and the importance of energy. Because I think if we work from the level that we are energy and that we contribute to the energy field of the world, I think that highlights where getting logosynthesis to be easily understood, it is such an essential element of it. And was this some part of your thinking when you were creating the basic assumptions, that it needs to be easily understood by anybody? You can say no.
No, but it was my my intention to understand it myself. And let's say, if I had, let's say, if I had been intelligent enough, I would be an engineer now. And engineers also always try to reduce the number of factors to the max, because then they can find a solution. So my engineer mind wanted to understand what's going on. And I took off a lot, and then this was left. And I couldn't, so I learned NLP, and I loved NLP because my engineer mind was satisfied. I loved the tapping because it was so simple. And it was very important for me that it would be simple. And from there, and really, I'm impressed today, and I'm really grateful if I see what made it possible, that the model is so simple that it can be taught. It is not my genius or whatever. It's something I can teach. And it's something these 22 people who worked on this conference have understood. I was, let's say, I was somewhat relieved today that nobody talked nonsense about logosynthesis. On the contrary, it was very coherent. They got it. So something must be be present in the model that makes it possible to understand this, and not only understand but also use it. And you can use it with kids, you can use it with old people, you can even use it with cats and dogs. You have a Facebook group on Logosynthesis with animals, and it works. But you have to say goodbye to the rationalizing, to the millions of concepts in psychology, in biology, whatever. And let's say that the big challenge was for me to make it simple. There's a very interesting experience I made is that when people have done the basic training, they try to complicate it. They try to add things which are not in the basic principles. Ladies and gentlemen, everything is in the basic principles. Everything. It's so simple, you can't make it simpler, and it doesn't get better when you make it more complicated.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. And I think, talk to me a bit about the importance though of the working alliance, because we have to step away from the logical side of things. We need to have trust that and to trust in the model that it can work. So us as practitioners, but also clients have to trust as well. So talk to us about that importance of that working alliance.
It took me really quite some time to get that, because the engineer mind understands everything very clearly, but is not really connected to the rest of the world. Don't know if you know many engineers, but usually they talk a lot, and they talk about what's in their heads. So it took me quite some time to realize that I need to connect to people, and I need to understand first before I can give them my very simple solutions. So the working alliance is in fact the creation of a field in which the client feels safe enough to give up their frozen energy systems. And because these frozen energy systems, all these mechanisms do not feel the deep pain and abandonment of the childhood trauma. So if you learn to work hard to be loved, or if you learn to be perfect to be loved, or whatever, you have a TBTA background, then you can't imagine that you don't need to work hard, that you can just be there with a person. But to give up the idea I need to work hard, or like in Harriet's demonstration today, to live without all the compliments and the mistakes you can make, just being there with another person. Before people get that takes time. And I cannot teach anybody anything if he doesn't feel safe with me. I can not resolve any structure, because the problem the client has is very often the solution of this client found in another lifetime. So if mommy doesn't pay attention to me and I do my best to help her, maybe I get that attention or that compliment or that stroke in TA terms. But once I've learned that mommy reacts to my drivers, but not to my needs, then I will produce the drivers again and again until the driver becomes the problem. If you work hard all the time, then and you're 45, you get your burnout. And then a lot of stress management therapies or coaching methods are around going slowly. But if I go slowly, I'm confronted with my abandonment, with the old trauma. And the same is true for addictions, for food or fat or whatever. So once you create a space in which the client is not alone in their pain, then you can start to work with logosynthesis. And sometimes it goes very fast. If someone comes to me in the current situation, usually they come because they've read a book or they've seen me on a video, and it can be very fast for me to create a working alliance based on this, let's say, what I threw into the world already. But if someone comes from the village where I live and the client doesn't know what you all know today, then I have to be just as careful and slow as anybody else. So if the work with Pamela and Harriet today seemed to go very fast, realize these people have a background, they have a connection which didn't need to be built up in the session today. So don't ignore the importance of the working alliance.
Yeah, I think you highlighted that really, really well. To build on that then, what about working with groups using logosynthesis? Because very much there needs to be that level of trust there. Can it be challenging to work with groups, or is it possible to work with groups?
I think the way we work with groups, especially in the beginning, of course, the working alliance with the group is just as important as the working alliance with an individual. And once you have a working alliance with the group, you can use logosynthesis in the way Astrid worked today, or in the way others work today, with the whole group at the same time. Everybody focuses on one aspect which can be processed, like in this beautiful exercise Astrid designed. Then you can work with a group, and what's beautiful is you work at the beginning. The group is in a state of dependency on the leader. You give such an exercise, and you get a lot of adult competence in the room immediately, which you can use to work on the purpose of the group. I'm still very curious how this will work for logosynthesis in organizations. We have a few people who work in organizations who start to experiment, and we can use the field mapping instruments. We can use the, let's say, the collective guided imageries or the guided exercises. What also happens, especially in training groups, is that people can start to work with each other in practice groups, which is a fixed part of the logosynthesis training we have designed. I think that there is a lot possible yet, which I don't know. I don't know what's possible because we don't have many experts in group dynamics in the system yet. But for instance, our working conference in the summer in Italy is built upon group dynamic principles, which I developed in the time I was training coaches and supervisors, but which contains a lot of material which is beautiful to work with, and we are building a lot of experience in working with groups first on that experiential group training level, but my guess is that people who work with organizations can profit from it and can develop this. And I think it should be possible because groups, let's say, can block a lot of energy, or teams can block a lot of energy. But if we find ways to work with teams and groups to resolve the energy and focus the energy on the purpose of a group instead of fighting each other, I would, let's say, it's a kind of thought exercise. How would it be if we would work with the current issues in the world with logosynthesis. How much frozen energy is in these systems which permanently fight each other? But that's okay. It's nothing something of my lifetime, I guess.
So you're not planning to step into the world and heal everybody or help them heal each other. But I think you're definitely hitting on something that is really powerful. And certainly in my own experience of the summer conference, I thought the ability of the trainers to hold the space and manage the space was exceptionally unique to watch and see, because there was a lot of people there and they needed that space to be held. And even when there was in breakout rooms, the skill level of the trainers was just beautiful to behold. So for those trainers who are here, who were at the summer conference in 2019, congratulations. I was really impressed, but I think it really does set the tone of that, building that working alliance without it needing to be on a one-to-one basis. And I suppose for you, bringing logosynthesis to the world, you figured it out, or began the process of figuring it out as you went along. And I'm sure you faced plenty of challenges from outside in the therapeutic realm. Do you want to tell us about some of the challenges you've faced and how you've overcome them, or if you even bothered to try and overcome them?
Let's say it was very difficult for me in the beginning to let's say to assess what was possible, because I was years ahead of everybody around me. So this started with, we had a very small group which had followed, let's say, all of the things I discovered. So it was a group that came together from, I think, the year 2000 already, and they practiced with me with all kind of strange things that I had learned across the Atlantic, and that the group met twice a year. And that's where it started, that I met a group of people who wanted to learn to think the way I'm thinking. And so this fusing of the psychotherapeutic and the spiritual was very important from the beginning. But let's say at the beginning was something interesting. I started teaching EFT not in Switzerland, but in England. And I started talking about spirituality in the breaks of the seminars in England. And there I learned the language, how to cope with resistance, but it was far enough from my official bed to take some risks. And when I learned, okay, there is a possibility to talk about it, I didn't expect that the Swiss would be open for it. And because I practiced my language in England, because they have healers in the hospitals, we don't have that in Switzerland. We don't do healing in Switzerland in hospitals. So England was ahead. And because I learned the language, I could start to teach logs in Switzerland. But I had real fights in the beginning. And because people came for something which was so far apart from what I was teaching that they really got angry, or they left in the middle of the seminar. Once the books were there, it became easier because I could recommend people to read a book, and then they said, "Oh, yeah, this is nonsense, or this is ESO, or whatever." So we lost that people in the circuit. They didn't come in anymore because there was enough basic information around to create a kind of protecting filter for the group. So that's from that moment on that enough people were on my side, we could start to grow. And I think that's the importance of, yeah, for me also learning a language to bring the things together which are so important for me, and discovering that I'm not the only one. I'm not the only frustrated psychotherapist, because living in a materialist, deterministic system is not really satisfying. And since I'm working with logosynthesis, and that I heard that earlier this day, I'm not tired of working with clients at the of the day. I'm not fed up. I'm tired. Okay, this is very intensive work, but it's not this all kind of tensions in my whole body because picking up all the misery people left on my plate or my carpet.
Yeah. So talk to us a bit about grief then as a follow on. So how can logosynthesis positively impact those who are going through grief? And is it a judgment call on the coach or the therapist or the counselor to know when to introduce logosynthesis?
I think grief is a very important emotion because there's a tension between how the world is and how it has been. Mm-hmm. And that tension shows in the emotion. And if you look at it from a very pragmatic viewpoint, you see that grief is the meeting of a fantasy about how things should be and the reality in which things are not that way. So that means, and that sounds very cruel, you have to retrieve your energy from that person or from that situation you lost. And that means when you work with grief and you have a working alliance in which you can address the loss as a sense of confrontation with frozen energy, what you often see is that a grief process which has been stuck for a long time is resolving, and there is so much pain in the room for 25 minutes, and then the client says, yes, I'm here now. So what you often see is that all the grief which was stored for years comes in that very compact part of the session after the sentences. And if you go through that grief, then everything becomes possible, because then people can open their eyes for what's possible now. The world is not unfriendly because someone had to go. There are still other people. And it's our job as therapists, psychotherapists, to be the first of the persons who are there. But that's not easy. That must be very careful, embedded in the whole process of the working alliance.
Yeah, and I suppose it does highlight my original question around, the therapist has to have that quality of that positive working alliance with the client to know if it's appropriate in that moment, because grief can provide a comfortable discomfort for people because they don't want to break away from it, because they don't want to lose on a cognitive level, they don't want to lose that connection. And I think that can be one of the challenges maybe a lot of people will face, will be the acceptance that you don't lose somebody, that you're just getting rid of that frozen energy. And I think that comes back to that ability of the coach or the client or the therapist to be able to explain that and understand it.
And that takes time. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's one of the things I wrote in this Reclaim Your Energy from Your Emotions book, little book. It's about emotions are resulting from beliefs about the world which are not true. And if you resolve the beliefs, this person should not have gone or left or died. This person has gone or has died. And we live, of course, in a very significant period in history in which we lose a lot. People lose their jobs, people lose family, people lose, let's say, everything that structures their time. So, I haven't been in a plane since half a year, and I used to fly twice a month. Nothing. So if I can't be with what is, and I have to be angry at the government because they don't provide vaccines, they make a mess. So what? They make a mess. Means I have to wait for another few months for my vaccine. I had a fantasy about the authorities, they would take care. Sorry, that was not a realistic belief. That was a limiting belief. The authorities didn't, because the authorities didn't know how to cope with this either. And so you see the aggression at the authorities. You see the nostalgia. Facebook gives me a memory of 2 years ago. We were in Thailand and it was beautiful. Oh, no, this year no Thailand. I want to travel. No. So we have a lot of things that become impossible, and we only need to take our energy back from the things we think should happen. No, they don't happen. Sorry, no seminar on Lanzarote in April. Have to cancel tomorrow. Oh, 2 weeks off in my agenda. What's the meaning of those 2 weeks? What's the opportunity in those 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think it's what people talk about a lot, and look for in terms of, I want to be able to slow down. I want to be able to, live in the now. Like, how many books are, I think I have one just here, The Power of Now. There are so many elements that are out there about, yes, the now, the now, the now, but so many people don't live in the now because of those frozen structures that are there and the challenges. And with that in mind, for you, with the development of logosynthesis, so it has come along so much in the last 60 years from where you started out to where it is now, and the importance of the community to bring this forward, because as you said, you definitely see a space for working with organizations and logosynthesis and groups, but it's going to be beyond you. For you, where do you see the immediate kind of close development of logosynthesis and where it can go and the opportunities that are available? And talk then about the importance of us, all of us, the community, in developing logosynthesis and bringing it out to the world in even more different possible ways.
Yeah, I think my role is different from your role. So if we take you as an example, I'm not a specialist in child development. I don't work with parents or children, but you work with parents and children you're right, Kai, so you can write a book about logosynthesis with children, and then maybe the second because Miriam wrote first. So I think we need, let's say, cells or groups of people who develop together in a specific fields. So we have a coaching field, we have a psychotherapy field, focusing on trauma. Suzanne is going to write a book on trauma. Matthias is writing the book about on the psychological aspects. So we have psychologists, we have psychiatrists, we have child psychologists, we have coaches, we have organizational developers, we have other specialists. Someone is working with logosynthesis and horses. And it worked because the horses are all traumatized. They have to jump and then they put the bar so high and they take a metal bar so that the, the horse gets scared and jumps higher. But the horse is traumatized and won't be successful in the competition. So if you use logosynthesis for that horse, or with that horse, or on behalf of that horse, you can work with that group. And so we have a lot of options to specialize and to work together with other people. My job is to feed you from the roots. So I'm going to write a book on logosynthesis on the body this year. I also have a project about procrastination because I made a seminar on that and that worked fine. And I thought, okay, I have to do something on beliefs, which every single practitioner can use. So I provide the raw material which you can fine tune for your specific mission, purpose you're dedicated to.
It's interesting you give the analogy of the horse. I'm actually about to start working with a professional athlete who, when it came to a competition time last year, he went in and he said his personal best in every single element of it was way beyond what the actual winning one was in each of the sections. And he said there was just a belief that he had. So it's pretty much exactly what you're talking about with the horse. So we're going to start working on that for the next piece of work. And I think there's definitely space. And I know I've been speaking with a few practitioners around developing that elite sport side of things, but also like we've talked about, Miriam involved with working with children. Myself and Miriam have just connected again today in relation to looking at how we can explore it. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things that you have brought with logosynthesis. So we have the basic logosynthesis and the development of it, but your encouragement and I suppose lack of ownership of logosynthesis, your encouragement to get people to go and find the different areas that it be brought forward is exactly what has allowed so many people to take this step forward and go, okay, well, yes, I could write a book on logosynthesis in children because I know about it, as opposed to, Willem, I need you to write the book because you are logosynthesis, and you've handed it off and allowed people to develop it, which I think is, like I said, is one of the most beautiful elements of this whole process. And I'm very conscious that we are coming close to time, maybe a little bit over, but maybe Alan won't give out to us too much. But I personally want to take this opportunity to say thank you, Willem, for bringing logosynthesis to the world, but also for asking me to come and speak with you today. This has been a pleasure. I always enjoy talking with you, and I hope those tuning in have enjoyed listening to you talk about yourself and logosynthesis.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about it, because I think it's important that everyone who does logosynthesis recognizes their own options in this great big world, and we have enough to do.